Hello everyone. This is practically our first lecture on a specific theme in international journalism. And it's one of the very basic topics, like what is international journalism? Now, let me tell you a couple of things. I do understand that the length of the video might be a bit too much. Not too much, but I'll try it to be as short as possible. Because I do understand that our attention span for longer videos is not good enough. But the important thing is that you have to understand that we are replacing virtual learning as well as face-to-face learning with these video lectures. So what I'm going to do is, I won't go into too much details, but the readings that we have, I'll try to just give you an idea of the readings and explain different topics given within the reading. So I'll try to keep it as simple as possible and explaining what is needed to be explained. International journalism is a term that is not very well known when it comes to practical journalism, in the sense that many other disciplines think that international journalism is more their domain, with the title of writing a story. Like many political science specialists think that it's their domain. Somebody who has knowledge of political science or international relations or international diplomacy can be a good journalist, because these people know the way the world works and how things happen. That's practically untrue. International journalism is a specific branch of journalism education and practical journalism, and as we all know that different universities and colleges who teach practical journalism take great pride in introducing their alumni who work internationally. So international journalism in this sense is mainly the prized beat in doing journalism. That said, we do know that international journalism is a complex phenomenon which includes a lot of different areas. Like you can't have a beat in international journalism. Like you can't say that I'm in international journalism, but I'll simply cover war. Yes, in the beginning, international journalists were simply covering war or events, and then with the advent of technology and access to different places, we have the ideas of foreign news home news abroad, covering celebrities in other countries and things like that, fashion, music, everything. But what is important, that we have to look at international journalism within a globalized world. Many people are changing the nomenclature from international journalism to global journalism, which is right and not so right at the same time, but still it works. Because right now we define an international journalism story by a story that goes beyond national, regional boundaries, like deterritorialized news and events. Right now, like coronavirus, I won't go into the detail, but the international journalism was something that began with war reporting, but it is no more the same. Although it has many patrons and what we can call rituals that still give an impression of covering wars, like focusing on conflict, for example, always focusing on conflict. As they say, what bleeds leads in international journalism. So normally tragic events, violence, catastrophes are the ones which are sold in international media. But that's not all, but predominantly this is what international journalism is about. Now we have a globally changed environment. Unlike Churchill, who was in service of the empire while he was war reporting, our modern journalist has a more wider canvas. because of technology, access, globalization, all these things, ideas and assistance that we get through science has given us a very broader reach than our predecessors 50 years back or 100 years back, or something like that. So, but there is a paradox. The paradox lies in two things. On the one hand, international journalism and international media gives a sense of global interconnectedness. When you watch CNN, Fox, if you wish, or any international medium, or you read a BBC website, or you watch BBC, or you watch Al Jazeera, you get a sense of global interconnectedness. That you can feel like being connected to everybody around the globe, and that's the one part of it. But on the other hand, after the Second World War, international journalism as a profession is dying. Like, there is not much focus upon international journalism, so news organizations don't prize their international journalism the way they used to have. And that's the paradox. On the one hand, we know a lot more about the world. We travel a lot, not right now. COVID-19 means that stay home, but usually this is what we do. So whenever we save money and we say, okay, let's go parts of the globe that are accessible to us, it could be a nearby city or a country across the continent, like all these things. So many people have many stories to tell, but at the same time, the investment in international journalism by media organizations is getting lesser. And that's the paradox. On the one hand, people know a lot about the world, but at the same moment, they're restricted. They don't get that much information about it. Keeping the timeline in mind, the next topic in this chapter, which is Kevin Williams' book, International Journalism, we are talking about the first chapter. It's the introduction, basically, is that we are living in an increasingly complex world. We already know that. You don't need to get a lecture on that, but there are a few things that need to be defined. Like, first and foremost, we have to understand that the post-Cold War world is different. Like, journalism until the late 80s, before the disintegration of the Soviet Union, was different. From the Second World War till date, it was easy to identify which side are you on and write a story as an international journalism. It's no more than like that. Like, there are too many players, too many themes to grasp, and the world has become complex. It's not that you can't define the world in good and bad guys and be on the side, whichever side you are on is the good one, and if you are on the other side of the divide, this one becomes bad and the other one becomes good. That's no more. This also brings in the question of professionalization, whether objectivity is the way it was like that. It also challenges the Anglo-American hegemony in the world, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Right now, what defines the world? International events, big international events define the world. Like 9/11, for example, defines the world. What did 9/11 do to international journalism? Like, from focus on Russia and whatever we were having during the Cold War, 9/11 redefined international journalism. What to cover? Afghanistan, Middle East, war on terror. All these are new themes. These have nothing to do with the Cold War era, and you need to move from one part of the world to another and to understand one culture after another. And then when you decide to take sides, it's also not easy. Like even if you are on the side of the NATO, you don't know what the European perspective is and what the US is. Like the EU, for example, and every part. Like, I'm talking about the dominant powers in deciding, like decision-making powers in international journalism, the powers that have control of the media. It's not easy. It's becoming difficult. So it's more complex than it used to be. COVID-19 right now, it's kind of a unifier. COVID-19, the whole world is thinking in the same way. So there is a bit of stuff going on with US President Donald Trump, and also hate against Chinese and hate crimes coming, but that's not that much. It's different. Like one important theme is the destruction caused by different war, and then immigrants. Immigrants was a big theme before COVID-19. So we are looking at a very complex world, and within that world, there are many people which are considered to become part of the developing world who are challenging what we need foreign news, like, who are challenging the way news were made. The New World Information and Communication Order, for example, like the disparity between haves and information have-nots, and all these things are some things that we live in right now. One of these is again how to make a balancing approach out of it, how to develop some structures where parity is possible. And we also see that the New World Information and Communication Order ended up in giving an idea from the UN platform to form kind of regional news agencies, information systems that could balance the information flow of information. But we see they didn't work out. The only successful alternative seems to be Al Jazeera, but still again keep in mind that the successful experiment of Al Jazeera might be giving a different version of international events, but it adheres to the same Anglo-American model of journalism. So despite the fact that we are contesting the developing world, the narrative that is being built in international journalism by global powers, we are still sticking to the same one. Now here is something that comes out of the whole debate, and that's new forms of international journalism, and these are really interesting. Like one thing is really important to understand. Like international journalism is not a fixed beat. It's in a state of flux. The only thing that you can understand about international journalism, if you are an international journalist or if you are an aspiring international journalist, that it's soul changing. It's not staying put. It's just moving on. And this brings in one of the biggest questions of all time. What is the professionally objective narrative? It's being challenged every now and then, which is naturally challenging the ideas of detachment and objectivity. Like you can't remain detached from the news, you can't be an unconcerned bystander. This is something that was considered to be advocacy earlier, not part of journalism, but right now people are going into that. Like one of these themes which emerged somewhere in the 80s was development journalism. Although development communication goes back into history into the 50s and 60s, but right now development journalism is more of an advocacy about the good things that are going on. On the one hand, in times of peace, development journalists try to give a holistic picture of different cultures and countries which were not being given a proper space because they were being measured by Anglo-American standards, which were also accepted by West, the rest of the West, and we were kind of following that. That has changed. But Western journalists from the dominant Western powers also started thinking differently when they went into zones of conflict, and they familiarized themselves with the loss of life and destruction happening in parts of the world. And they said, okay, now doing good is good journalism. So doing good might not always be objective. It is never detached. So we are looking at newer forms, like patriotic journalism. Like you are doing it all the time for your country, like in service of the empire. Winston Churchill. That's no more journalism at all. It's not defined at all. We say we are done with that. Rather, we opt for peace journalism. So, peace journalism, we'll discuss peace journalism in detail later on. But peace journalism is something which was considered to be not objective, and which was considered to be advocacy, but right now people think it's the right way to do, because doing good is good journalism, therefore peace journalism is journalism. You don't have to worry about advocacy, and there is nothing purely objective. And this also brings in new players, like we have, instead of sticking to a media organization's policies, we have big, like emerging big names or people who are doing freelance. So they don't want to stick to any news organization. They will sell their story to the organization that accepts their perspective. So we are having a variety of perspectives. Not easy to do, but still happening. Freelancers. And then you have stringers who are different from the journalists that we used to know. And then there are fixers. Fixers are increasingly becoming vocal by using social media, giving their side of the story, despite the fact that their organization is not helping them. And this brings us to the next question, which is in your book also, which is the question of information and power. So, usually international journalism, a couple of decades earlier, or rather a decade earlier, or rather even 4 or 5 years earlier, was considered to be somehow helping international relations, like reporting international stories had a touch of diplomacy. It somehow international journalists considered themselves to be partly diplomats, like giving the side of the story which will help in solving different problems. And when you do that, you naturally side with somebody. Instead of the truth, you are siding with a version of truth that some nation believed to be the valid one. So that is how information is used to contain power, like control of international events, control of the narrative, and there you get a picture of the world which is suitable to those who control access to media and access to the narrative. This is being very closely monitored by people who are against war, who are against hegemony. Not very successful, but still happening. Like it's kind of the question here is that if you support hard power with soft power, which is diplomacy and journalism, why do you do that? Most of the time, historically, it is done to sell wars, to sell hatred, to justify atrocities and all these things. So that's why we say that propaganda and power are directly opposed to truth and goodness. And that's why we are always questioning whatever is going on. Now, this is here again, we think that good journalism means that we give a version of truth which is slightly altered, but it's useful. But usefulness of a truth which is contaminated is a very subjective issue. And therein lies the problem. And that's while we question the idea of information management, when we confront it with truth, what is more valuable? And we say that goodness is more valuable. Truth told, serving the best interests of humanity beyond borders is the responsibility of an international journalist. The idea that an international journalism serve his own country by telling the story, a foreign story, to a domestic audience is no more accepted. Domestic audience, if they want to learn the truth, have to dig deeper, and they have to persistently look at the move of events. You can't just have packages that you like at home at the cost of other people's misery.